Hello, my brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Off the Beaten Path, the show that looks at paranormal events both historically as well as in modern day times. As always, I'm your host, Reverend Hagen, and as always, I'd like to welcome our listeners at SCRMradio.com. That's Scream. Radio.com for all your horror and paranormal needs. Now, my brothers and sisters, we're going to start the show a little differently today because, first of all, I received this amazing Hawaiian shirt from my friend Starlet LeBron. She knew that I dug Hawaiian shirts, and she incredibly thoughtfully sent this to me. It's got all the classic horror monsters from back in the day, and which are quite honestly my favorites. So thank you so much, Starlet. She's also, excuse my nose grabbing there, is a psychic, if that's your gig. I'm going to leave her link down below if that's your brand of vodka, if you'd like a psychic reading. She's absolutely amazing. One of the things I'd also like to talk about today is how this whole thing started. I've said this a few times, but there's a reason that I'm saying it. My son and I, this was about 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, we used to watch, and we still do, YouTube stuff together, right? He's 16 now, so it's amazing that he actually wants to spend time with me. So, and that's really where we connect, is watching the strange and unusual, or, sometimes political stuff, but very rarely, usually the strange and unusual stuff on YouTube. And back in the day when we were watching this, he said, Dad, you should do a show like this. You've been studying this stuff for years. Totally give me the sales pitch, right? Now, at the time, he had his own YouTube channel. He has since taken it down, which I'm actually kind of grateful for. It was really sweet. He did a lot of gaming. He is a gamer. He's an incredibly talented gamer. But I digress a little bit. He also had some really funny skits that he and his cousin did. It was just a blast. And, he actually was getting a bit of a following. It was really neat. But he suggested that I do my show. So I did a show on the Tunguska Blast of 1908. It was like a 10 or 11 minute deal. As kind of put my foot in the water. It was really fun. I really didn't have much experience. I was just using a webcam off of my computer. Didn't have a microphone. Super low tech, low budget, but it was so much fun. And my second show, I think, was the Lady of Fatima incident, right? That happened early in the last century. So, as kind of a whim, I went on Twitter. I hadn't used Twitter in years. I had been using it to sell my carvings, which some of the canes are right over here. But that's really all I used it for. And then I thought, well, Twitter's a really good way to market my, it was a good way to market my carvings. I'm just going to throw it out there because I like the fact you could put a hashtag, and anybody that was interested, like hashtag horror, hashtag paranormal, people that were interested in it could, check it out. I say that like you don't know what it is. I'm the old guy that's social networking incompetent, all right? That was just a really cool thing for me. So anyway, I do it. Thinking, well, people dig it, they dig it. If I get a following, I get a following. Either way, it's really fun. Well, between the first and the second episode, I was contacted with a guy who said he owned Dungeon Radio, which was kind of an old-time experiment in radio, where they would tell old ghost stories and that kind of thing, and creepypastas in the modern-day parlance. And would I be interested in being on his show? Now, I had almost started on another radio show strictly about the paranormal. About 4 months from that. But then the closer it got to airing, they're like, yeah, and for only $350. And I'm like, here we go. I'm not just some kid from the sticks, right? Or some bright-eyed guy that's going to jump on this stuff. You know, at the time I was already in my 50s and was like, come on. Yeah, no. You might as well be the Prince of Zaire, you know, needing my bank information. So when I got this email from Dungeon Radio, I really kind of blew it off, but I responded saying, well, I really appreciate the interest. We had a little bit of back and forth. And the owner, whose name is James C. Greening, and the only reason I looked down at my notes for that because I love James. We're actually friends now. He's a great guy. But just before I started recording this, I got a call from a dear friend of mine who needed to talk for a while, so it's much later than the Rev is used to staying up when I recorded this. Regardless, man, hopefully this episode's not going to be nothing but me digressing. Anywho's, he said you need to be on a show, you needed a better microphone, and I thought, here we go, as I'm reading it. He said, send me your address, and I'll send you a microphone. I thought, what the hell do I have to lose? I did, and he did, and it started me being on the radio. After one episode on YouTube, Cinderella story, kind of unheard of kind of deal. Well, his path kind of diverged, and it was time for him to sell the radio station. So he did. It turned into almost a straight, initially horror radio show with people, Dungeon Radio basically turned into Scream Radio. The new owner, Tracy, who's still the owner, fantastic gal. I was very uncertain if my platform or my show would jive with the platform of Scream Radio, because it's not straight horror. It's about the paranormal and historical paranormal events for the most part. So I wasn't sure how that was going to jive. But it's jived really well. One of the reasons I'm bringing this whole thing up is that one of the contributors very early on to Scream Radio was Andy Dean Van Scoyoc. Now, she is a very famous author. She's been doing radio creepypastas, writing books, doing voiceover work for years. She had to step away from it for a while before she got, I can't remember, I think she was on Dungeon Radio initially, and then she made the leap to Scream Radio, but I can't remember if that's the case or not, because my little gray cells aren't what they used to be. Anywho, she and I they still play her stuff on Scream Radio, but she has gone on to do her own thing. Now, she and I have stayed really close, and I just think she's dynamite. I know this is way more personal stuff than you guys normally hear from me, but what happened is, about coming up on 4 years ago, my sister passed away. And it was before I joined Scream Radio. But it was really, really hard for me. It still is if I think about it too much, if I'm being honest. But through Facebook, of all things, there were certain women that reached out to me, and that were friends of mine, that offered to be a surrogate sister for me, which was just the sweetest thing in the world. And Andy's one of those people that has kind of adopted me as her brother. Now, our paths are very similar in a lot of ways, but she was always really respectful, and still is, about my show here on YouTube and on Scream. She's been so supportive, and somebody that has that kind of experience in the industry to say, hey, no, you know what? I think you're talented, and I really think you should keep going with this. I really think this is a good deal. James did the same thing. Tracy's been very supportive as well. Andy, though, kind of made the bridge between, like, my Twitter friends. I know this is absolutely crazy. And my Facebook friends, because I'm old, like I said, and I'm still trying to understand the balance between all the social media. Like, I have an Instagram account. don't even know what the hell I'm doing. I just throw pictures on there every once in a while. I am so illiterate, it's ridiculous. But I wanted to give Andy a big shout out. She's still writing. She does daily meditation. She has her own YouTube channel, which is going to be in the notes below. I'm also going to put it in the notes below her Lamentation Project. It's her website, and it lists all the things that she's doing, all the different things that you can either purchase for her. She's got a lot of sound and a lot of voice work that she's done that she offers free samples of if you want to use. She's just this remarkable woman. She's got this amazing meditation garden where she lives that she will do videos for. Her main platform apparently is Instagram, which I've got to learn, like I've been saying. But I want to give that huge shout out to Andy Dean Van Scoyoc. If I butchered your name, Andy, I'm so sorry. You know I love you to pieces. Thank you so much for your support. James, I cannot thank you enough. James has got some really cool stuff going on too. I'm leaving a link to his stuff down below. This is not just a promotion show for other people, but James Tracy and Andy, James and Andy, really went out of their way to not just help me, but to let me know, hey, no, I mean, you got bags of talent. I know this may sound hard to believe, but the Rev isn't always as confident as he can be. And it's always nice to get people that are in the horror industry or in the industry period to give you that kind of feedback. So thank you very much. Their links are listed below. Now, what we're getting into tonight is something I don't normally do either, if I'm being honest. And I try to be honest with you guys, you know that. You already know from the title of this, what we're going to be talking about is the Philadelphia experiment. Basically, I'll give you the synopsis, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts. In a nutshell, what happened is that the story goes, on August 12th, 1943, in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, an experiment was done to try to make a ship invisible. Not just on radar, not just a cloaking device, but to literally make the USS Eldridge, which was, and I'm gonna do this a few times because I want to make sure I get all my facts right here. USS Eldridge was a cannon-class destroyer that they were experimenting to make invisible. The story goes, they flipped the switch on their rigmarole on their device, and the ship disappeared for over 2 hours. Now, when they flipped the switch, some green mist or fog formed around the ship. It disappeared. 2 hours passed, roughly. The ship came back. Now, when the ship came back, some of the crew members, because there was a crew on the ship, why they decided to have a crew on the ship when they tested this, I don't know. But the story goes that they did. So, when the ship came back, some of the crew were screaming. Others were just disoriented. Some were apparently on fire. And others were fused to the bulkhead of the ship. Fused with the ship. These are human beings on a molecular level. So the experiment was a disaster. Now that's the story, okay? Yes, I have a problem with this one. When I was a kid, I believed this story 110%. Because it sounded like something that we would do. The way the story evolves is, and again, I am going to be going to this, that what we do know for sure, what we know is that Albert Einstein was working with the Navy on helping cloaking ships from water mines, from mines that were designed to be magnetically drawn to these metal ships to make them explode. The axis of evil, which is a real term, not just the George Bush term after 9/11, but was the actual term for Germany, Japan, Italy, the people that we were fighting against in World War II. Now, the Allies, which were us, the good guys, also used these bombs as well. But Einstein's idea was, if we put these coils around the ship that emit an electromagnetic field, it will cloak the ship from these mines. In other words, the magnets on these mines won't recognize that there's a metal object coming near them to be drawn to and explode the ship, right? That's actually a real gig. The story goes, however, that after that, this is where we diverge from the facts that we know. The story of the Philadelphia experiment tells us that Tesla took over this project to try to make, initially how the writing went is to cloak a ship from the enemy, right? That's how it was initially presented. It turns out that according to the story, he was trying to make a ship invisible, and using Albert Einstein's device was able to do that on a small ship, not a Cannon-class destroyer, which is a lot bigger ship, but on a smaller ship. And he had failure when it came to trying to do something like a destroyer. That's how the story goes. Excuse me here. So, Tesla ended up either being fired or bowing out of the project at that point. So, according to the legend, it was then taken over by Dr. John Van Neumann. And when I heard the name, all I could think of was the Seinfeld Newman, where Jerry would go, Newman, every time Newman's name was mentioned. But I'm a goober. So, Newman's apparently famous quote is, "If people do not believe that mathematics is simple, it is only because they do not know how complicated life is." Now, I never saw this until I looked a little deeper into this story recently. Because it sounds like a meme to me. Doesn't it sound like a meme to you? Something you'd post on Facebook or Twitter? And we all know that memes are BS for the most part. Yeah, they're pithy and funny, but come on, they're not factual. So I don't even know if this guy actually said this. Limited sources on his quote. So, supposedly Van Neumann, was successful when he took over the project after Tesla either bowed out or was fired, right? Because he couldn't get something as big as a destroyer to disappear. So, Van Neumann apparently had success, but not just using Einstein's electromagnetic coils, but using something, and I'm going to read this to you. He was said to have used a zero-time reference generator that was invented by Tesla. Now, we know Tesla actually invented this, but Tesla invented a lot of stuff. It was said to lock the Earth's magnetic fields and act as a cosmological reference with the electromagnetic fields at the center of the galaxy. So somehow, by locking onto the Earth's magnetic field and act as a cosmological reference for the electromagnetic field of the center of the galaxy, this was going to help them make the ship disappear. A little strange, I know. Tesla supposedly gave a very cryptic warning to Van Neumann, which basically said there could be radical personnel problems with this if you use it, just so you know. So again, on August 12th, 1943, they flip the switch, green mist happens, and ship goes away for a couple hours, comes back. People are screaming, it's chaos, people are on fire, people are literally fused to the ship on a molecular level. Now, apparently we know all this because a guy named Al Bielbeck, excuse me, claimed that he was a part of this project. That's how most of this information came out. There are books on this. There was a movie in the 80s. Michael Paré was one of the sailors on the ships that time travels to the 80s. Michael Paré from The Greatest American Hero. Kind of the Vinnie Barbarino of The Greatest American Hero. If you remember that show, it was a fantastic show. It was so great. So great. That I was actually, for 3 years in a row, when that show was on the air, at Halloween, I was The Greatest American Hero. Thank you very much. I even have a childhood story about this beautiful woman driving down the highway as that song was playing. I could go on, but I won't. So the story really got into popular culture. But I digressed again, probably at the wrong time. So, Bielbeck, or Bielek, I'll just spell it out for you and you can butcher it yourself. Bielek. Al claimed that not only was he on this project, but he and his brother were actually on the ship when the device was activated. And during the time slip that this happened, he and his brother jumped overboard and materialized in 1983 in Montauk, Long Island. Now, Montauk is the home of Camp Hero Air Force Base. So, you know, and according to Al, they were doing experiments on time travel at the same time, or the reason they materialized in 1983 is that somehow these two time experiments coincided with each other, and he and his brother materialized in 1983, where they stayed in 1983. Okay. So, according to him, the reason that this happened, according to Al, was that there are actually 5 different dimensions that we live in, and the last 2 are time. So time just isn't the 4th; it's also the 5th. All right. See, it's already nutty to me. And that each human being is born with a lock, or you could call it a vector in time, to anchor us to a specific time in a linear timeline, right? This is all very linear. But according to him, because of the device that Tesla had made, and using that in conjunction with the electromagnetic device that Einstein had created, it unlocked those vectors. We were not pinned to any one spot in time. Everybody on the ship and the ship was kind of released. And since they were doing an experiment in 1983, they were somehow drawn when they jump ship to the facility in Montauk, to Camp Hero. I don't know why I can't remember Camp Hero. Now, apparently Camp Hero, according to Al, was the site of a lot of kind of nefarious experiments going on. They allegedly funded projects in psychotronics, black hole simulations, and weather control. This is all according to this one guy, Al Bielbeck. We'll just call him Al since I keep butchering his name. So, almost 100% of our information about the Philadelphia experiment, at least the genesis of it, starts with Al. One guy. Okay? And it kind of rolls over into another supposedly historical paranormal event. Along with the nefarious things happening with our government at Camp Hero Air Force Base, there was an institution called the Brookhaven Institute nearby that was supposedly a shadowy agency in collusion with the government for these experiments. Now, the Brookhaven Institute actually does exist, okay? Now, because they are government funded, according to their website that you could visit, that will be in the notes below, they do, their website says this, they research nuclear and high energy physics and superconducting magnets and condensed matter physics physics and to have a nuclear accelerator. Man, am I butchering everything. So basically what they do is nuclear and high energy physics, superconducting magnets, condensed matter physics, and have a nuclear accelerator, which is super cool. I think nuclear accelerators are both amazing and terrifying. Just the amount of power that's involved and the experiments that you can do. Now, does it mean we should do them? I don't know, but it is the cutting edge. It's what quantum physics are based on, what subatomic particle research is all about, is done in these nuclear accelerators. And there's a bunch all over the world. There's one in the Bay Area. I believe it's in Palo Alto, where I grew up, for the most part. There's very famous ones in Europe. And there's one, apparently, in Montauk, New Island. Long Island, New Island. Hello. It's very late. Montauk, Long Island, where these experiments were done. Now, what a coinky-dink, but there's another guy, one guy, named Preston Nichols, who claims, and I'm going to read it for you, to have worked with the Institute during this time. There were a bunch of psychic experiments that took place, including teleportation, black hole creation, materialization of objects, and with some of the best psychic minds of the time, and with talented star children. Thank you very much. If you watched last week's episode, star children was the focus. Star children and indigo children were the focus of that show. When this is done, if you want to check out that show, I really think you should, because I can use all the views, comments, and likes and subscriptions that I can get. Sorry. So, one guy claims all this happens, and that all the experiments ended on August 12th, 1983, 40 years to the day after the Philadelphia experiment. Here's the kicker, though. This guy says supposedly the people involved in the project all had their memories wiped. Now, that's according to this guy. There have been other reports of the Brookhaven Institute and the Montauk. It's called both the Montauk Project Conspiracy. You can look that up. Or the Phoenix Experiment. Okay? Now, the Montauk Project is said to have everything from, for those of you watching, I'm putting up some views of the Montauk installation. You can see the nuclear accelerator there, right? See all this above ground stuff. Well, apparently, this thing was expanded and goes over 12 stories below. And nobody but people in the know exactly how many levels this thing has, okay? Now, we do know that there are many installations that go below ground. A ton of military installations. Excuse me again. I'm going to get a little more libation to wet the whistle, as it were. That's just a fact. That's something you can look up. There's a lot of military installations, at least in America, I'm sure elsewhere as well, that instead of building above ground, they went below ground for secrecy reasons. When it comes to quantum physics, there's a lot of cutting edge stuff and a lot of technology that's becoming based on that research. So, competition's really high, secrecy's really high. I'm not saying that nefarious things don't take place at these facilities. I'm sure they do. But if you listen to some of these, apparently they would grab huge groups of homeless people off the street, take them to this facility, and conduct horrific experiments on them. And few of them survived. People had psychic abilities enhanced. Experiments were conducted in teleportation. A portal in time was created which allowed researchers to travel anywhere in time or space. This was developed as a stable time tunnel. Now, that's a hell of a claim. That in the 80s and a little beyond that, if you believe them, not that it all ended in 1983, like this crazy guy, Mr. Preston Nichols says. According to him, it all ended on the same date as the Philadelphia experiment in 1983. According to a lot of other people, it went a little further than that. But the idea that they built a time portal, here's the story behind that. Supposedly they built this time tunnel, right? They could travel anywhere in time and space. Well, somehow, as they're doing this, and I know this sounds like an episode of Stargate, but bear with me. Somehow when they were doing this, some monster creature-like thing came through the tunnel and killed everybody on our side of the tunnel and cost apparently a lot of lives to put this thing down. This is how the story goes, right? And because of that, they shut down the tunnel entirely. Now, come on, people. If you really believe, especially if you're a conspiracy theorist, which I am, but this one I have a hard time sinking my teeth into, and this is why. If you've actually built a time tunnel that you can go anywhere in time or space, you're going to shut it down because, and you're the government, or not even the government, but just a shadowy branch of the government that money is being funneled into, apparently billions of dollars being funneled into for this technology. Because of a few hundred deaths, you're going to shut it down? I'm telling you, that's not going to happen. It's not. If 10,000 people died at that facility, I have a very hard time believing if they literally could go anywhere in time and space that they would shut it down. Sorry, I don't buy it. Apparently there was contact made with alien extraterrestrials. And this is the one that I kind of want to punch people in the head for, because it makes no sense to me, the terminology. Technology was exchanged with them, which enhanced the project. This allowed border access to hyperspace. Border access. What does that even mean? And I'm the one that put that in parentheses. The article put in parentheses hyperspace. But what is border access to hyperspace? The whole thing goes a little beyond credulity. You decide. To me. Mind control experiments were allegedly done concerning runaway boys and girls, primarily boys. They would get these runaways, this is different than apparently the homeless that they conducted the experiment on. Even though I'm pretty sure these runaway kids were homeless too. Have to fall into that category if this has a scintilla of truth in it. And what they would do with these kids, according to this article, is torture them mentally and physically, break them down completely, and then reprogram to be whatever they wanted. My brain, coming from the Cold War era, says, well, obviously they were assassins and spies. Or maybe they were what are now politicians. We don't know. It's all shadowy and very mysterious. But then again, they're linking the experiments on here with the USS Eldridge that supposedly disappeared in the Philadelphia experiment, was somehow linked because Al and his brother, and sometimes they say his brother and sometimes they say Duncan Cameron. So Al and Duncan jump ship in the middle of a time slip, which is pretty wild to have the cojones to do that, to say, wow, I don't know what's going on here in this weird dimension that we've fallen into. I'm jumping overboard. Come on, people. But again, that's just me. They also say Al and his brother, or this other guy, Duncan, that they met von Neumann. If you remember, Neumann was the guy that headed this project, that took it from, that this guy, who's a mathematician and famous in a way, but nowhere near to the extent of Albert Einstein or Tesla, Nikola Tesla, right? He was able to work from those two minds and take it a step further. This guy that not a lot of people have heard of. They're killing me here with this. They met von Neumann in the 80s at this facility, at the Montauk facility. Even though we know von Neumann died in 1957. If you believe in time travel, if you believe in any of this, I suppose you could say that then at some point, von Neumann perfected time travel, traveled to the future, or maybe Al and Duncan, using their first names, traveled back in time, got Neumann up to the future, put him back in the past, so then his future also became his past, and allowed him to die in 1957. But that's not how it's stated, my brothers and sisters. It is stated that they met von Neumann at this facility. I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. And again, they're saying that the mythology that's growing out of this thing is echoing a bit of what, we got to make sure we get this guy's name right. I want to give him all the credit in the world I can. Preston Nichols. Most of the mythology then agrees with him. It basically says that everybody involved in the project either was sworn to secrecy, had their brains wiped of all the incidents and reprogrammed with banal scientific discoveries, or was killed. I have a hard time believing they do all three of those things, but again, this is the mythology behind the thing. So this is the first time on one of my shows that I have out and out said this is false, that the Philadelphia experiment did not happen. This is why I say that. There is not a scintilla of proof that this actually happened. There are books that have been written, movies that I've talked about, supposedly factual books about the Philadelphia experiment actually happening. I know by a single one. Every single one where they've quoted somebody of note, right, who can prove that they worked for the government at the time, who can prove that they were in the area at the time, or at least with naval intelligence or the Navy at the time, has said I was grossly misquoted. These guys are making it up. Now, I know you may say, Rev, come on. They're just towing the party line here, right? Of course the government's going to say that. But in literally every other historical event that I have mentioned on this show, something has happened. The Tunguska blast, we know there was an explosion that knocked down over 100,000 acres in Siberia. An above-ground explosion that killed over 100,000 reindeer in one herd. Now you have to remember, at the time of that explosion, there were no cars, right? There were no planes. There were no helicopters. None of that stuff was going on at the time. People rode horses after hearing of the event, so it took a while to hear about the event. than to get there, but we know something happened. So when I look at that as a paranormal thing, I look at it because something unusual happened. Now, science told us in that case that it was an above-ground explosion. I don't agree with it because there was none of the minerals that are normally left when a meteorite hits or explodes, right? None of that was there. We just know stuff was knocked down. The Lady of Fatima. The Lady of Fatima, over 1,000 people gathered to watch the Virgin Mary appear over Fatima, Portugal. Okay? Because 3 children that they believed said that an angel had told them that Mary is going to appear on this certain date at this certain time. So thousands of people gathered and saw something. Some people saw Mary, some people saw a bright light, some people saw a metallic object, but this thing was reported the world over and had eyewitness accounts. There are pictures of the event, right? The Suicide Forest. We know historically that people have gone to that forest in Japan to die for thousands of years. We know that. It's a historic fact. My show is about why. The Philadelphia experiment, there's no proof that this happened. In fact, it's been proven that the USS Eldridge wasn't even in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard at the time. It was 1,000 miles away. Now, what people could have seen is perhaps the experiments that Albert Einstein was doing with ships of this type, with naval destroyers, putting the coils to get it to cloak, not to go invisible, but to be invisible to magnetic mines that were used at the time. The also really interesting thing is that the God, I'm burping on air. The USS Timmerman was doing an experiment with a new kind of power generator that did apparently create arcs of lightning around parts of the ship. Nobody was hurt by this, but it did create kind of a visual light show. Lightning is always cool. Or maybe it is just to me because I'm a goober and I'm permanently 6 years old. I don't know. But I can see how somebody would see that event and think something a little bit more mysterious was going on than it was. But that's documented that it happened, even though at the time it was a secret experiment. But all these years later, it's been declassified to say, no, that was an experiment. So I could see somebody kind of doing, well, maybe it was something a little bit more than that. That I can understand. But this guy, Bilbeck, making up this story, and I firmly believe that he did, took just that visual that if anybody remembered that light show that happened on the Timmerman, on the USS Timmerman, which was a naval destroyer, right? And concocting this whole story. It's a fantastic story. It's an incredible story. I was so caught up into it when I was younger, it wasn't even funny. And when I say when I was younger, I mean when I was in my late teens. I've been looking at this kind of stuff since I was 9 years old. But then as I got older and realized, well, this isn't all just fantasy. Some of this stuff really is pretty mysterious. This fit the bill. But in this day and age, when we can look back at the documents, I'm convinced it didn't happen. Now, if I am wrong, if you can prove to me that this was an actual event, and I don't mean with the books in the 90s that were written about it that have been debunked since by credible people, not just skeptics, but by actual paranormal investigators, have debunked it. The government's debunked it. The Navy's debunked it. If you can show me anything that's not anecdotal evidence, I will do an entire show on what you present me. In the comments below, I'm begging you, prove me wrong on this one. Show me what actually happened. You thought I was going to say, show me the money, didn't you? even though I just did. I didn't say it in character, and that's completely different. If you can show me with evidence that this happened, or shoot it to me at rev.hagen@gmail.com if you feel more comfortable doing it that way. I'll take a look at it. If it's legit, I'll air it. All right? I promise you. I'll do an entire show. I'll mention you by name if you want, if that's what you want. If you want to keep it on the down low, I'll keep you on the down low. But please prove me wrong on this one. But as it sits right now, as fascinating as the story it is, as much as I would love to believe that this was an actual event, not that people got hurt, burned alive, or fused to the metallic deal, but that something this momentous actually happened, I would love to believe it. But there's no proof of it anywhere other than one dude that started this whole ball rolling. So there you go. This was a longer show because I really wanted to get in the plugs for the people that have been so kind to me. And there's a couple other people that I'll plug in my next show that have shows in Europe and that are kind of big deal paranormal investigators that really gave me support early on in my career, for lack of a better term, that I really want to thank as well. This is something that I want to do for a living. Of course, I don't even have 400 followers yet. I'm very close to 400 subscribers. I'm going to do a big show when I get them. But I don't even have 400 subscribers yet. But I really believe that this show could be something really spectacular. But I need your help to do that as well. If you could, please like and comment. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. If you're of a mind, I have a Patreon page that should be coming up on the screen just about now, and will also be in the notes below. Please become a patron. I'm still working through my Patreon page on how to make it better, how to give you exclusive material if you are a patron. Some of that's coming up in the next few weeks for the patrons. There are special episodes that are only for you. So if you like what you're seeing, if you'd like to see more of it, please become a patron. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse today. Maybe I'll take care of some of this in the editing. I don't know. I don't like to be one of those shows where I'm just a voice and I'm giving you a very brief synopsis on 5 different things. I like to focus on one thing, and I like to look in the camera when I'm doing it. Even though, like my father says, I really have a face for radio. Thank you. I like to think I'm making some kind of contact with you guys. So, my brothers and sisters, even though I debunk this, and I don't like debunking things, that's not my thing. I've just had a lot of people request that I do a show on the Philadelphia experiment. I wanted to do it. I wanted to believe this, but God, as short a time ago as when I was in the Army in the early 2000s, and I got out in 2004, I had already known the story fell apart, and I was so upset doing almost no research. You can find out the story falls apart. Great story, yes. So, once more, I'd like to thank our listeners at SCRMradio.com. That's Scream. Radio.com for all your horror and paranormal needs, as well as to all you following on YouTube. As always, my brothers and sisters, especially during this madness, you keep those heads up. Stay safe. I love you. Have a great night.